Actually, it's evening. Thank you to the Eastern Sussex Democrats for inviting me to speak this evening, and for everybody who came out to hear the speakers. As you all know, my name is Claire Snyder Hall, also known as Claire for Delaware, and I want to be the first woman to represent RD14 in the General Assembly.
Yeah.
As we all know, 2024 is a crucial year. Choices on the ballot, LGBTQ plus rights are on the ballot, democracy's on the ballot, and indeed the American dream itself is on the ballot as we face a series of crises that are threatening our prosperity and quality of life. And the top four I've identified for my platform in this district are the housing. We have a dire need for workforce housing. We have an extreme shortage of healthcare providers. We have public schools that are bursting at the seams. And we also need to take climate resiliency very seriously. We're working really hard. I've knocked on almost 2,200 doors so far, all over the district, and from what I'm hearing on the doorsteps, we're feeling very optimistic about September 10th, which is the primary. The challenging thing about running in a primary is that all of the candidates pretty much have the same agenda. Right, with some maybe minor differences at the margins, and so what you have to distinguish yourself. And the thing that I believe really distinguishes me is that I have a broad network of strong relationships on the ground in Dover. And if you've heard different, you've heard wrong. I developed these relationships through my 13 years of political work in Delaware, including 5 years as the head of Common Cause Delaware. So let me tell you a little bit about myself, though, before I get into the political work. I grew up in Sarasota, Florida, and I left in the mid-1980s for college. I went to Smith College, and then eventually ended up getting a PhD in political science from Rutgers University. And I ended up, eventually, after 2 years in normal, getting a job at George Mason University, and I was on the faculty there for 12 years, teaching, doing research, and running academic programs. So I've had 20 years of classroom teaching experience overall, and I know how education can change a young person's life, and I will always support teachers, students, and public education. So I ended up meeting Mickey in 2003, hard to believe it's been that long, and we got involved in electoral politics as lobby day captains for Equality Maryland. And just a little story, I'll never forget our first year doing it. We went into State Senator Ida Rubin's office, and we were asking her to support marriage equality, and she's like, "No way, you're crazy, Maryland will never support equality, marriage equality." So we were feeling a little demoralized as we left the room, but we walked into the hall and our friends Mindy and Melissa leaned over and said, "Don't worry about her. We got someone to primary her. His name's Jamie Raskin." So that was fantastic. Fast forward to 2011, Mickey convinced me to give up tenure and we moved to Rehoboth. And we immediately jumped into Democratic politics. Attended our first RD14 meeting in a dark hotel room on the side of the road. Ms. Crane was there, of course. And we met, Mitch and other really cool people, and they invited us to get involved. We joined the committee, and then I was elected chair within a year, and I chaired that committee for 4 years. I also got involved in a lot of issue work during that time period. I worked on marriage equality. I co-led the weekly phone banks at Camp Rehoboth with Chris Beagle for months. We went door to door and manufactured housing communities, building support for rent justification bill, and we also worked on death penalty repeal. Then I was asked to run for the Delaware State Senate. And I ran against Ernie Lopez, some of you know, who's anti-choice and voted against marriage equality. So we ran a really exciting grassroots campaign, tons of volunteers, it was really fun, but sadly, it was not to be. We lost, and it's kind of interesting because I've noticed a couple of things that are really different now than they were then. One is that when I was running before, there's a lot of homophobia. No gay can win in Sussex. No gay, I'm not hearing that at all. Even the Republican candidate is having pride stuff on his site. The other thing is there was all this discourse about the come heres versus the from heres. You're not from here. That nobody cares anymore. That's completely over. So that was my experience in 2014, and then I was recruited to take the helm at Common Cause Delaware in 2015, and I ended up serving in that capacity for 5 years. And did it 2 years, and then Mickey and I moved down to Florida because my mother was not doing well, and we wanted to take care of her before she died. So we did that. And between that and taking care of my dad, who died of Alzheimer's in 2012, I have a very strong concern about aging, and I'm going to fight for more long-term care options here, which are very much needed. So I came back to Delaware in 2020, and I got my old job back, and they upgraded me. And I have several accomplishments I want to talk about at Common Cause Delaware to show that I do have a track record of success in Dover. The first one was in 2016. I led the effort to rescind the 1970s call for an Article 5 constitutional convention, which is a Koch brothers, top agenda item. That was successful. The second thing I did was I put together a coalition of 30 community groups, and we were lobbying Senators Coons and Carper to come out for filibuster reform, so that we can pass the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. And although they didn't pass, Senator Carper did indeed come out for filibuster reform, which I was told caused a smelling salts moment in Coons' office. So it was great seeing Senator Carper again, because he and Coons, campaigned for me in 2014. So the third thing is I worked really hard on the Delaware voting rights legislation, and I was one of the people that was really pushing for the Delaware Voting Rights Coalition to stop focusing on no excuse absentee voting and go to vote by mail. Because you don't need a constitutional amendment for vote by mail. And we passed that, and we passed a same-day registration. I still consider them successes, even though the court, overruled them, and we have to do a constitutional amendment. We need to keep our Democratic seats and then add 2 in the House. So it was through that work that I really got to have a great relationship with the Speaker of the House, Valerie Longhurst. So, that was another relationship that I was able to build during my work with Common Cause. The final thing there's 2 more. I led the charge to stop a constitutional amendment that would have that would make changes to the Constitution but leave intact Jim Crow era literacy and residency requirements that are still in the Constitution. And then finally, I stopped the town of Seaford from giving corporations the right to vote, which is a preposterous and ridiculous idea. And I don't get it, because no state in the whole country allows that, except that there's 3 towns in Delaware. And just last week, the mayor of Dewey thought that they should start talking about that for Dewey. And just like in 2018, the mayor of Rehoboth and some commissioners were for that in Rehoboth. And in both cases, the townspeople rose up in protest, and it was defeated. And I'd like to get that banned all across the state. Yeah. There's already a bill in play for that. Well, I guess it's not in play anymore. It'll be in play next year. Through my work with Common Cause Delaware, I've built a strong network of good relationships. And several of the legislators I worked with have come out and early endorsed me, including retired Senator Karen Peterson, retired Representative John Kowalko, sitting Senator Laura Sturgeon, and sitting Representative Eric Morrison, and also Charlotte King just came out and endorsed me in the Cape Gazette. Okay, I'm running out of time. I do want to mention that on the topic of, actually time doesn't help. I do want to mention that I am endorsed also by Progressive Democrats of Delaware, and also by LPAC, which is a national LGBTQ+ organization. The point I'm making is that because of my political work in Delaware on a range of issues, and through Common Cause, and through working on people's campaigns, I've developed this network, and that's what I bring to the table. That's what differentiates me. I want this position because I want to do the work. I'm not using this as a stepping stone to higher office, and I'm not going to do 2 terms and then retire. I am in this for the long haul, full time. I want to help constituents with their problems, which I already do because I have a lot of friends in a network of relationships. I want to bring resources back to Eastern Sussex, and I want to be at the table when the laws are made to protect choice, to protect transgender rights, to pass vote by mail, and to work on housing, health care, public schools, and the environment. Thank you.